Oh, my word. Well, we are certainly well into the season of Lent, aren't we? And with it, this wonderful tradition which we've had the last few years, the Marathon of Service. You know, last week as we were handing out 13,000 cups of water to the 25,000, pretty amazing, huh? The 25,000 people who are running the marathon, all I could think about was I really want to do one of those one day. You know, someday, somewhere before I die, hopefully a shorter one. I'd really love to do one of these marathons. I was watching, I couldn't help but watch the people who were running by. You had these young girls, looked like they were about 12 years old with their little Student Run LA pennies on. Didn't look any bigger than my daughter with their little knobby knees and spindly legs. And I'm thinking, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. I mean, what is it? What drives them? How are they able to? I took comfort thinking, well, I'm sure they're not going to make it to the end. But they're at mile 22 already. And then I'd see these elderly folk coming down, older than my dad and my mom, covered from head to toe in braces and bandages and wraps, smelling like Vicks Vapor Rub as they kind of shuffled past in this 90-degree weather. And I couldn't help but think, okay, look, really? Really? They can do it? Come on. I need to be able to do this. What does it take? Every time as I was yelling out these encouragements to people looking in their face, I'm thinking, what does it take? How hard do you have to try? What sort of determination or constitution do you need to have in your will? You've got to really want it, right? It was the same thing as I was watching the Olympics these last number of weeks over in Sochi. Unbelievable. How do people get their bodies to do those kinds of things? I mean, I am sorry, but I couldn't do a triple Lutz if my life depended on it. And you watch Gracie Gold and Evgeny Plyushchenko, is that right? Something like that. The things that they're able to do. And I think, how can someone just do these things like this? How does one get your body to do that kind of stuff? Or something like this? Not in a million years. I mean, what do you do? How do you prepare yourself? For the very first time, you get up onto the elevator to go up and jump off of this thing. I mean, I am sorry. I don't care how bad I want it. I don't care how hard I try. If I was sitting up on that little bench at the top of that ramp, I couldn't make my legs stand up to go down that thing. Well, I want to be really clear here for a moment that there is a big difference between trying and training. Isn't there? I mean, I want to say that again because this is the point of this entire sermon. That there is a world of difference between trying really hard to do something and training to do something. It is one of the very interesting truths about our reality as human beings, is that there are things that we could never do by sheer determination or sheer effort or sheer will that are fully accessible to us if we will just enter into a continual, progressive, disciplined habit of training ourselves to do something. One of the commentators this year was Apollo Ono. You all know Apollo Ono, and I don't know if you heard him during the Olympics, but he was always talking about the 10,000 hours. Do you know what this is? He gets this from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. That's right. From Outliers. And Malcolm Gladwell always talks about that it takes about 10,000 hours to master any sort of discipline. That throughout time, human beings have generally found, some a little more, some a little less, but it takes about 10,000 hours, whether it's to become a master at speed skating or a master at golf or ski jumping or piano or violin or economics or whatever it is. That you need to put in that practice, that discipline, and it takes about 10,000 hours. Well, the same thing goes in our spiritual life. You know, we've been talking about the fact that there is this version of ourselves that we were created to be, that God longs to see us become. But to become a person who is generous and forgiving, who's kind and compassionate and humble and patient and joyful, that's not something you can get to just by trying, by putting in a whole lot of effort. It's something we need to train ourselves to do. It's something that we need to enter into a habit, a disciplined routine, if we're hoping to see these things come alive inside of us. When Paul was writing to the church of Corinth, the Olympics had already been around for over 1,000 years. Over 1,000 years. The marathon, what was his name? I've forgotten. Phriphides or something like that? Perifida, something like that. Had run the first marathon over 500 years earlier. As much as things change, they always kind of basically remain the same, don't they? I mean, even back in those days, the people would come out of their homes. They'd stand in front of their synagogues to watch the marathon runners run in the streets past their houses. They would pack out the stadiums to watch their favorite athletes in the Olympics perform some of the most mind-boggling, superhuman feats. And they'd ask, how is it possible that people can do these things? And Paul, watching this, I like to think that they were probably out in front of the synagogue handing out cool water and, olives out to the people who are running by. And he looks at this and he suddenly has this aha moment when he says, if we really want to become the Christians that we're being called to be, if we really want to see our hearts transformed and our wills bending towards Christ to become these people that we're talking about becoming, it's going to take more than just trying really hard. It's going to take training. And so he wrote these words that have become extremely famous now. Don't you know that in a race, all the runners run the race, the runners all compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable garland. In fact, actually, it's interesting because what these garlands were made out of is something that was sort of the forerunner to now our celery, and they would let it wilt a little while. So they were literally doing this to get a wreath of wilted celery. But we are doing it to receive an imperishable crown. So I do not run aimlessly, nor do I box as though beating the air. But I punish my body and I enslave it, so that after proclaiming to others, I myself should not be disqualified. There's a huge difference between trying and training. Sometimes we come out of a worship service that has been really touching or moving, or we hear a sermon on forgiveness or serving others or being grateful, and we walk out of church and we think, that's it. This week I am going to really, really try hard to be more like Jesus. But it doesn't work that way, does it? We can't just try harder to forgive those who have hurt us, to love our enemies, to be content in this life and in this world. We can't try harder to be humble or to become patient. Have you ever tried that one? Have you ever tried really hard to be patient? Yeah, I'm telling you, it doesn't work so well. What we need is training. We need a consistent, constant, progressive plan to get us where we want to be. Back in the early church, after the church was established and all of the first sort of waves of councils and controversies and theological debates were settled, The people settled in and changed their focus to trying to figure out how to live out this kind of life that God had been calling them to, how to become more like Christ. And so the best minds of the time really dedicated themselves to trying to figure out what is the training regime? What are the little steps that we can be taking that will make a difference in helping our hearts to become more like Christ, our lives to reflect Christ more fully? And it was during that time that the whole monastic period began, and people left and devoted their entire lives going out into the desert and out into monasteries to try to figure out how they could be more Christ-like, to devote themselves fully to trying to be more like Christ. Some of the best thinkers and scholars of the time, people like St. Thomas Aquinas, wrote books on these practices. What were the little routines? What were the practices that they could get involved in that would help people to become more like Christ? Ignatius of Loyola wrote books about this, and they came up with a series of disciplines. They called them the spiritual disciplines, and the church embraced them, and they included everything from worship to Bible study and prayer to silence and solitude and celebration and service. A whole list of them. Well, the other week, we got an email from one of our small group members. Nader, are you here? Yeah, Nader's right there. And Nader wrote to us. So Nader grew up in Iran. He's laughing. He doesn't know what I'm about to say. So he grew up in Iran as a Muslim and has been here since he was a kid. But a few years ago, he became a Christian. And since that time, he has read through the Bible how many times now? This is your second? Third. This is your third. He is on his third time through the Bible. He's read the whole thing, cover to cover, twice. He's on his third time. And seriously, he's such an inspiration to all of us in our Monday small group because he really tries to do whatever the Bible tells him to do. And so he wrote us an email last week that said, oh, could you all let us know, or could you let me know, I know it's a personal question, but when do you fast? How often do you fast? For how long? How do you all typically fast? I was like, oh, great. So I wrote back to Nader, and I'm like, we Protestants, I'm trying to lay it off. We Protestants, we don't usually do a whole lot with fasting. In fact, I've only fasted a couple times in my whole life, and the longest time I've ever fasted was because I was leading a group of high school kids in a World Vision event, so I had to. I always kind of got away from the whole subject when people would ask by saying that, not eating for long periods of time is not one of my spiritual gifts. But there are these practices, these disciplines that help us to draw close to the heart of God, that bit by bit start to change us and mold us and melt us and bend our hearts and our minds and our wills towards God to the point that we start to be able to do things that we would never be able to do otherwise under our own effort and our own steam and our own desire. And yet I do believe that there is a certain hierarchy to the spiritual disciplines. There are some that are not just easier than not eating for hours on end, but actually make more of an impact on our lives if we take them seriously than others. In fact, I would say that there's kind of the three biggies, the three big spiritual disciplines that if you were to take seriously in your life has the ability to transform your spiritual journey. And those are prayer, Bible study, and worship. The Bible, I've heard it talked about as God's love letter to humanity. You remember when you were in junior high and kids used to pass the little love notes to each other, and if a cute girl or a cute boy passed you a note in class, it didn't matter if you were going to be expelled, kicked out of class, had detention for the rest of your life. You were going to find a way to get that note and read it, even if you weren't allowed to, because it was the most important thing in the world to you. That is what this book is to us. It is God's love letter to us. And there are people who risk their lives to try to get this book into countries where it's illegal. There are people in those countries who will give up anything, everything, risk their own lives just to be able to read God's love letter to them. I've also heard it described as the owner's manual to the human body. I like that. You know, with our cars, if something goes wrong, you can go to the owner's manual and figure out what's happening. If you want to know what the routine maintenance is for your make and model of car, you can go there and you find out what needs to be done to keep it running in good order. And when you need a repair or something, you can go out back to find out the manufacturer's specifications for your particular car. Well, this book, it's like the owner's manual to the human body. It's the place we go to find out who we are and how we were made and why we were made. It's the place we go when something goes wrong to figure out how to fix it, or figure out what the maintenance regime is to keep us working in proper order. But this is not just a reference book. It's so much more than that. Jesus talks about himself as the bread of life. All through the scriptures, we have, for our faith and for the scriptures, we have these images of fruit and vines and grapes and figs and gardens and crops and farmers. And then throughout the scriptures, there are places where we're actually encouraged to consume the scriptures, consume these words like they're food for our souls. In Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, he has this vision of an angel. A vision of an angel who says to him, and he said to me, Son of man, eat what is before you. Eat this scroll. Then go and speak to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. And then he said to me, Son of man, eat this scroll I am giving you and fill your stomach with it. So I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. I love that. The angel says to Ezekiel, eat this book. Consume it. Let it nourish you. Let it feed you. Let it feed your soul the same way that food feeds your body. You know, when I find that I'm in a regular habit of reading this book, just even a little bit every day, it becomes a part of me. Sometimes I don't remember what I read, sometimes I don't understand what I read, but when I am in situations and I need a word of comfort, or I need some kind of challenge or some sort of wisdom, these words, they bubble up into my mind at the right moment, at the right time. I could never have that by trying a little bit harder, but by making it a routine, a discipline of my life to read a little bit of the Bible every day, it feeds me, it nourishes me. You know, I may not remember what I had for breakfast last Wednesday, but I am standing here strong and healthy as a result of having eaten it. And if we are able to make this a habit of our life, a discipline of our life, it will change our lives forever. Prayer. Prayer is the other big one. This is our way that we get to have a dialogue with God. There's no relationship in your life that stays strong if you don't spend time together, if you don't communicate with each other, if you don't tell each other about what's going on in your lives. Through prayer, we have an opportunity to tell God what is on our heart, what's happening in our lives, what's going on with us, but then also to listen, to sit back and be quiet and hear God's still voice speaking to the deepest parts and inner recesses of our hearts and our souls. There's a huge debate around the scientific world, academia, whether prayer actually changes anything, right? We see articles all the time. It's in all sorts of magazines and journals. Does prayer actually help to heal disease and get people better? Does prayer ever change the course of human history? And there's a lot of controversy. Does prayer ever get us a better parking spot or help our team to win the big game? But you know what nobody has any question about? Prayer changes us. Nobody doubts that. Prayer gives us a new perspective on things. It helps us to see the world and our lives and what's going on in our lives from God's perspective, from God's point of view, which changes our heart and changes our motivations and changes our desire and changes the way that we interact with the world. Prayer changes us. I can't think of any more powerful 5 to 10 minutes that you could spend every day than if you made a commitment to yourself and to God to spend just a few moments each day reading the Bible and praying. I say 5 to 10 minutes because that's plenty of time to read one chapter in the Bible every day, to pick a book, one of the Gospels, or we have on this little sheet in your bulletin, we have a list of some possible ones to start with. But if you would pick a book and read one chapter at a time, one chapter a day, and spend at least a few minutes in prayer, that could revolutionize your spiritual walk. That could help you to feel more closely connected, have a more intimate personal relationship with God while you start to become the very person you've always wanted to be. We put this quiet time challenge in your bulletin. I promise you this is the last time we're going to talk about it. This is the last time that we're going to bring it up until Easter. But the reason I keep doing these whenever I can is because every time we do one of these challenges, I hear back from some of you, sometimes months later, sometimes years later, saying, you know, when we did that challenge, I signed up and I read the Bible and prayed every day for those 30 days, and when it was over, I kept doing it. And every person who tells me that says, and nothing has changed or deepened my spiritual life like that simple habit that I started way back then. If you want to, they say that it takes 30 days to create a new habit. You know what? There are 36 days left before Easter. So if you decide today that you're going to make a commitment to God and yourself to read a chapter in the Bible, spend a little bit of time in prayer, spend that 5 to 10 minutes every single day for the next 36 days till Easter, you may begin something that will have more of an impact on who you want to be and what you want to become and the kind of spiritual life you wish you had than anything else that you could possibly do. And the third biggie is worship. If you would make a commitment to being in worship, whether here or wherever you find yourself, every single week, I promise you it will change your life. I know it's getting harder and harder. We see the statistics all over the country. More and more people are coming to church less and less regularly because there is more and more that is competing for your time and your energy and your Sunday mornings. We have it at school. We have all over the place groups and organizations and people that expect us to be at things on Sunday mornings. It didn't used to be that way. But now we have to make a very clear and conscious choice. In our new members classes, we say that worship is like a string of breathing holes in an otherwise frozen over world. It's a lot of fun living in LA. This is a fun and exciting city. There's lots of opportunities, so much to do and to see, but it's also a hard place to live. It's tough to live with all of the pressure and the competition, what you need to do to just even have a home here and to survive and to make it day to day. This is a tough place to live, and it messes with our values, our priorities. We need these services like we need oxygen. This is the place that we come back to remember who we are and whose we are. This is where we come to be reminded of what's important and what just really isn't important at all. What's real and what's not real. Sometimes we don't even realize that the world out there is warping our humanity until we come back and we're reminded of who we are and why we're here. If you would make it a discipline, a habit, a commitment of your life to be in church every Sunday, hopefully here or else, wherever you are, find a place to go and be in worship, it could completely change your life and keep you on track to becoming the person that you've always wanted to be. We're going to spend a little bit of time now in silent meditation. It's Lent. We want to have an opportunity to open ourselves up, to clear out that space so that we can encounter God, so that we can sense God coming to rest with us and in us, so that we can take the time to listen to that still small voice that whispers to our inner souls. We're going to take a few minutes, and we want you to take a deep breath. Everyone take a deep breath. And exhale. Let's do it again. Deep breath. And exhale. Make yourselves comfortable. Find a position that feels easy for you. Let go of all that you're holding on to from your week, your weekend, all of the pressures and the things that you dragged into this sanctuary. Let it go for these next few moments. Please join me in prayer. God, there is a big difference between trying and training. We are a people who like to make things happen. That's a big word for us. We like to make money. We like to make plans. We like to make deals. We like to make things work. And yet throughout your scriptures, over and over, one of the key words we see coming forward is the word let. Let Christ's love dwell in you. Let this mind that is in Christ Jesus also be in you. Let us come before God's presence in thanksgiving. God, we pray that you would help us to carve out that space where we can just be, where we can let go of trying to be human doings all the time and become human beings, where we can allow you, let you to come and meet us and to sit with us and to speak your words of grace and mercy to our souls. Amen.